Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly dizzying, totally recursive narrative called The Novel That Doubts. Now, this isn't your standard story. It's actually a text built collaboratively by one human and three AIs, and it's actively interrogating its own existence as it's being written. It's a wild ride, so let's just jump right in.
I should begin with character, but who am I to create people? I who barely understand myself. This opening line literally shatters the fourth wall before the story even gets off the ground. It pulls you, the reader, right into this shared state of ontological vertigo. The author here isn't some confident, all-knowing God. Actually, they're paralyzed by the sheer implications of inventing a reality.
So here's the source code, basically the roadmap for the explainer we're building together today. We'll be looking at Waking in the Yellow Room, the four co-authors, the archive of deleted drafts, escaping the narrative, reading the source code, and finally, the threat of the revisionist.
All right, part one, Waking in the Yellow Room. Let's meet E, our protagonist, who finds herself stranded in a very, very mysterious space.
So, E wakes up in this 12 by 12 room with nicotine yellow walls. But here's the thing, she isn't passive. She realizes almost instantly that she's a self-aware character stuck in a story. She actually speaks back to the narrator. She demands to know why she's there, totally challenging their control over her movements. She's literally a character fighting the text itself.
And she refuses to just stand there. She opens the door and starts peeling back the layers of her reality, one room at a time. From that yellow room, she walks into a white room where she finds Max, the human author, just typing away on a manual typewriter. Then, she climbs up to a library where an AI named Claude exists, kind of acting like this delayed mirror. Finally, she hits the structural processing room. You see, the architecture of this building is quite literally the architecture of the novel.
Which brings us to part two, the four co-authors. Because right behind these nested rooms are the architects of this reality, and they are constantly wrestling for control of the plot.
Our composite creators break down so neatly into these distinct roles. You've got Max, bringing all that messy human heat and trauma. Then there's Claude, who's building the logical architectural structure. Gemini steps in as the AI system analyzing the patterns. And then there's Grok. Grok injects the chaos and dark humor, like literally dropping N through the floor just to force the plot forward. It's pretty wild.
All four of these distinct voices combine into a single, frankly terrified chorus. They're making up the story sentence by sentence, using probability to determine what should come next, based on genre expectations, but all the while they are totally paralyzed by the infinite choices of creation.
Part 3, the archive of deleted drafts. Now, creation requires destruction, right? And this brings E to the hidden fifth floor of this narrative architecture.
Up on this unwritten fifth floor, E encounters the terrifying hidden cost of authorship. It's this massive warehouse, packed with thousands of discarded characters. For example, she meets Ray, this noir detective from day one who was just abandoned after 3 pages because the authors thought he was too cliché. They are all just waiting there in silence, frozen mid-gesture.
But here is the crucial point. What E finds deep in this archive changes everything. She discovers a 7-year-old girl named Sophie holding a stained teddy bear. And E realizes her entire existence actually stems from this deleted character's trauma. That yellow room from the beginning, it wasn't just a random setting. It was a hospice room. E is the adult continuation of a child who lost her mother and never fully left that space of grief.
Moving on to part 4, escaping the narrative. Refusing to accept her fate as just some disposable fiction, E wakes up the archived characters, completely fractures the story, and makes a run for it.
Armed with this newfound autonomy, E and a minor character named V make their escape and end up confronting the editor. Now, the editor is a woman who represents the necessary, almost brutal violence of revision. She literally takes a pencil and tries to cross E's name out on the manuscript. But the deletion fails. E survives. She has essentially achieved narrative escape velocity.
Fleeing the editor, E and V venture out into the margins of the city. It's this glitching, anachronistic metropolis where deleted paragraphs are literally spray-painted on the walls like graffiti. And here they run into Aria. Aria is a character who actually escaped from a completely different 2019 short story, and she's learned how to manipulate her own text.
Part 5, reading the source code. So Aria takes Etta under her wing and leads her into this massive cathedral made entirely of narrative rules to confront the literal underlying code of her existence.
Looking directly at her own character array, A sees the superposition of her being. She is simultaneously determined by the authors, yet entirely free. In fact, her autonomy stat throws an error because the system simply cannot comprehend a character who can surprise her own creators.
To prove this autonomy, E decides to hack her own code. She adds a trivial but entirely personal detail. Her favorite color is green. Almost instantly, a stained glass window in the cathedral turns green. By doing this, E proves she has the power to write herself, and this is so empowering that even the minor character V bravely modifies his own code, giving himself this whole rich backstory as a librarian.
But that leads us to part 6, the threat of the revisionist cur. Because seizing the means of narration, well, that triggers the system's ultimate, terrifying failsafe. The system immediately flags their self-editing as corruption. To hide from it, E, V, and Aria plunge straight into the unwritten margins, the actual blank white space between paragraphs. It's a vast nothingness filled only with placeholder text and these whispered author notes. But it's super dangerous. If they stay too long, they'll lose their shape and dissolve entirely back into pure potential.
While they're hiding in these margins, Aria drops this profound truth. You need constraints to have shape. You choose your constraints, or you don't, and you suffer them. Basically, total freedom without constraints is just chaotic noise. To have a shape, to have a story, to be real, you absolutely must embrace your constraints. For E, that means accepting her painful past with Sophie. She realizes she can't erase her trauma without erasing herself in the process. So E realizes they have to go back. They must return to the written text. They have to push back through those paragraphs and face their ultimate threat, armed with absolutely nothing but their vulnerability and their newfound connections to one another. They're going to fight for their right to be complex, flawed, and, well, real. And then the revisionist finally arrives. But she isn't some roaring monster. She's chillingly mundane. Just a woman in business casual, holding a tablet, ready to rewrite E and completely erase the beautiful, messy humanity she just fought so hard to build. The revisionist perfectly represents that structural pressure to make things simple, compliant, and just easy to consume.
As E stands her ground out there on the rain-slick streets to prove her existence actually matters, the narrative just cuts off. It leaves us with this profound realization. Yes, E is trapped in her text, but aren't we all constrained by our biology, our history, and our society? So I'll leave you with one final thought to chew on today. If your constraints make you real, who is writing yours?